Long before it became one of the most famous names in history, Troy already occupied a position that virtually guaranteed its fate as one of the most contested centers of the ancient world. Located in the northwestern region of Anatolia, near the Dardanelles Strait, the city controlled one of the most important routes between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea. This location made Troy not just a geographically important point, but a true economic and strategic gateway through which goods, cultures, and competing interests from different civilizations constantly passed tasks. From its earliest settlements, around BC, Troy began to develop as a fortified city, growing in successive layers over the centuries, each one built upon the ruins of the last, forming what is now known as one of the most complex archaeological sites. And over time, this privileged position allowed the city to accumulate wealth consistently, turning it into a major center of trade between the peoples of Europe and Asia, including the Mycenaeans, the Hittites, and various cultures of the Eastern Mediterranean. The city was not merely a point of transit, but an active center of exchange, where metals, textiles, food, and illusory goods circulated constantly, creating a dynamic and highly profitable economy. As wealth increased, so did the need for protection, and Troy began investing in increasingly sophisticated defensive structures. Its walls, which would later be described as nearly impenetrable, began to take shape to Archaeology in the earliest phases of growth, built with massive stone blocks and advanced engineering for the period. These fortifications were not only a response to external threats, but also a clear symbol of power and stability, demonstrating the city's ability to protect itself and control its territory. At the same time, Troy was developing as an organized urban center, with residential areas, storage spaces, workshops, and administrative zones that pointed to a structured and functional society. The city did not grow chaotically, but followed a pattern that reflected planning and adaptation to its surrounding environment. Its proximity to land and sea routes kept Troy in constant contact with other cultures, absorbing outside influences while also projecting its own identity beyond its walls. This constant exchange contributed to the development of a complex society with clearly defined social hierarchies, where elites controlled trade and resources, while workers, artisans, and farmers sustained the city's economic foundation. Over the centuries, Troy ceased to be merely a regional city and became a point of international interest in the ancient world. Its control over strategic trade routes meant that any power seeking to expand its influence would inevitably have to deal with Troy, whether through alliances, agreements, or conflict. This factor began to attract the attention of different peoples, especially the civilizations of the Greek world, who saw the city as both an economic opportunity and a strategic obstacle. As it approached the period around 1200 BC, Troy had already gone through multiple phases of reconstruction and reinforcement, reaching a level of development that placed it among the most important cities of its time. Its walls were stronger than ever, its population had grown significantly, and its influence extended far beyond its physical limits. However, the very position that had brought prosperity also began to generate tension. As trades intensified and routes became more heavily contested, the control exercised by Troy began to be seen as a problem by other emerging powers. What had
once been simply a strategic advantage started to turn into an unavoidable source of conflict. Troy was no longer just a wealthy and well-positioned city. It had become a symbol of power that needed to be challenged by those who wanted to dominate the flow of wealth in the ancient world. This quiet transformation, built over centuries of growth and consolidation, was setting the stage for one of the most famous conflicts in history. The city that had prospered because of its strategic location was now beginning to pay the price for that same advantage. And while its walls still stood firm and its economy continued to thrive, outside forces were already moving toward the inevitable. Around 1200 BC, Troy had reached the highest point of its evolution as an urban center and regional power. The city that had begun as a strategic settlement now stood as a highly organized fortress, with an urban structure thought reflected not only growth, but also control and sophistication. Its walls, which had been improved over centuries, reached an impressive level of engineering, with enormous stone blocks forming thick, sloping defenses designed to withstand both direct assaults and prolonged sieges. Watchtowers placed at strategic points provided a wide view of the surrounding region, allowing any enemy movement to be identified in advance. The city gates, carefully designed, served as strict control points where the movement of people and goods was monitored, reinforcing the city's authority over everything that passed along its routes. Within those walls, Troy presented a dynamic and well-structured urban environment. Residential areas were arranged in an organized way, with houses built close together, forming a compact network that supported both protection and internal movement. In the higher parts of the city, larger buildings indicated the presence of the ruling elite, responsible for managing trade, politics, and foreign relations. These spaces were not merely residences, but centers of decision-making where the city's fate was shaped. Around these central areas, workshops and productive spaces revealed an active economy, with artisans working metal, pottery, and textiles that supplied both the internal market and long-distance trade. Strong storage facilities indicate the accumulation of grain, olive oil, wine, and other essential resources, ensuring that the city could withstand periods of instability or external blockade. This level of preparation shows that Troy was not only prosperous, but also actively anticipating possible threats. Daily life within the city reflected a functional society in which each group played a clear role in maintaining the system. Merchants dealt directly with caravans and ships arriving with products from distant regions, while farmers from the surrounding lands guaranteed the basic supply of food. Warriors trained constantly, fully aware that the city's wealth made it an inevitable target. This military preparation was not merely preventive, but an essential part of Troy's identity, as the city already saw itself as a power that had to defend its position at any cost. However, while the city was growing stronger internally, the external landscape was becoming more dangerous by the year. Trade routes that had once been sources of prosperity were now becoming points of intense dispute. Civilizations of the Greek world, especially the Mycenaeans, were expanding their influence and seeking greater control over maritime trade. For these rising powers, Troy represented a direct obstacle, a control point that restricted the free flow of wealth and imposed economic barriers. This tension did not appear overnight, but was built over years of indirect disputes, negotiations, and demonstrations of strength. Small conflicts, commercial pressure, and unstable alliances gradually shaped a scenario in which war was no longer a distant possibility, but a logical outcome. At the same time, Troy maintained its posture of control, fully aware of its strategic importance and confident in its defenses. That confidence, however, was beginning to be tested. As Greek power consolidated, the idea of challenging Troy gained momentum. What was at stake was not just a city, but control over one of the most valuable trade routes in the ancient world. Inside the city, daily life still appeared stable, but signs of tension were already visible. The constant reinforcement of the walls, the intensified training of warriors, and the increasingly strict control of the entrances showed that Trojan leadership understood the seriousness of the situation. Troy was at the height of its strength, but also more exposed than ever before. This paradox, maximum strength at a moment of growing vulnerability, defined the position the city found itself in on the eve of its greatest challenge. The prosperity accumulated over centuries had elevated Troy to a place of absolute prominence, but it had also turned the city into an inevitable target. The balance that had sustained its greatness was beginning to break, slowly creating the perfect conditions for a conflict that would change its history forever. The transition from tension to open conflict was inevitable, but it was not immediate. What began as trade disputes and strategic rivalries eventually turned into one of the most iconic confrontations of the ancient world, the Trojan War. Although surrounded by mythological elements, the foundation of the conflict points to a concrete reality: the desire of Greek powers to break the control Troy exercised over trade routes between the Aegean and the Black Sea. The city, which had prospered for centuries because it controlled that flow, had now become the main obstacle to the economic and political expansion of the Mycenaean kingdoms. This situation led to the formation of a coalition of Greek forces, uniting different city-states around a common objective, bring down Troy and seize control of the region. The siege that followed was neither quick nor simple. For years, Greek forces positioned themselves around the city, searching for ways to overcome defense ease that made Troy nearly impenetrable. The walls, built and reinforced over generations, fulfilled exactly the role they had been designed for resistance. Direct assaults failed again and again, and the city managed to hold its position, protected by its advanced engineering and the preparedness of its defenders. Within the walls, the population lived under constant pressure. Daily life, once defined by trade and growth, was now reduced to survival. Resources had to be managed with precision, and every decision made by the leadership had a direct impact on the city's ability to withstand the siege. Warriors remained on constant alert, ready to respond to any attempt at invasion, while the civilian population adapted to a reality of scarcity and uncertainty. Even so, Troy did not collapse. Its internal organization and reserves allowed the city to endure for a surprisingly long period, further strengthening its reputation as a fortress that seemed almost impossible to defeat. On the Greek side, however, the stalemate was beginning to take its toll. A prolonged siege meant enormous costs, both in resources and morale. Keeping troops mobilized for so long required strategies that went beyond brute force. It was in Thai's context that one of the most famous tactics in history emerged: the use of the so-called Trojan horse. More than a mythological symbol, this strategy represents a fundamental shift in the way the conflict was fought. Unable to break through Troy's defenses by conventional means, the Greeks turned to deception as a final alternative. The idea was simple, but extremely risky: create the illusion of retreat, leaving behind a massive object that would be interpreted as a symbol of surrender or an offering. The execution of this plan marked the definitive turning point of the conflict. By bringing the object inside their walls, the Trojans made a decision that, in that moment, seemed harmless, but carried devastating consequences. During the night, forces hidden inside the horse emerged, opened the city gates, and allowed the Greek army to enter. What had been a prolonged siege turned, within a matter of hours, into total collapse. The invasion was swift and brutal. With no time to reorganize their defenses, the Trojans were overwhelmed from within. Chaos spread through the streets, and the city that had resisted for years fell in a single night. Buildings were destroyed, residential areas were set on fire, and the population was scattered, captured, or killed. The urban structure that had been built over centuries simply ceased to exist as a functional system. The impact of that destruction was absolute. Troy was not merely defeated, it was erased as a power.